Our second speaker is, I think, something like a pop star in Japan. To everyone that I mentioned this name, and every Japanese colleague or friend said, "Oh my God, I know him." But unlike most pop stars, he's actually a neuroscientist, and he wrote his PhD about mathematical models of muscle contraction. That looks or sounds very, very impressive. He works as a senior researcher at the Sony Computer Science Laboratories, is a visiting professor at Tokyo University, has written numerous books with different topics that I can't mention all. But the one relevant for today is called The Little Book of Ikigai, The Secret of Japanese Way to Live Happy and Long Life. So I'm looking very much forward to have him here on stage. Warm welcome, Ken Mogi. Thank you for being here, please. Ken Mogi, thank you for coming again.
Yeah, thank you.
Before I come to this question, maybe a little bit to your person. I said it in the beginning, to whomever I speak, everyone seems to know you. Maybe for the non-Japanese in the room, if you could quickly say what you have done, and not only related to Ikigai in the past years, and how you came to becoming a researcher at Sony Institute.
Right. I used to, I still do some television work, so probably that's why I am considered kind of a household name. Sony, it's interesting. Mr. Idei, he used to be the CEO of Sony, and I actually study the mind-brain problem, consciousness, and one of the key concepts is qualia. Maybe you come across with this, qualia, sensory qualities like redness of red, and Mr. Idei kind of read an article on qualia, and he's tried to start a very top-level brand called Qualia in Sony, and that's how I kind of started to get involved in Sony research seriously. But so what I do at Sony is a very fundamental basic research, so not so much applied work and so on. But yeah, I'm in a very interesting situation. Half industry, half university. Some media work and so on. Yeah.
And is your feeling that the perception of happiness or the perception of having a purpose is different in the Western and the Eastern world? So is there a specific Japanese way of happiness or Ikigai?
I think it's quite actually different. You used to have, I guess many of you are actually, I don't know, atheists, nowadays intellectuals, but you used to have one God, right? And 10 commandments, and the purpose comes from the top. In Japan, we used to have 8 million gods. That's the Japanese Shinto philosophy. So the Japanese typically don't start from the assumption there's a grand vision of life. The Japanese tend to start from the assumption that each individual has his or her own agenda. And each of us are different, and so there's no unifying grand picture, so to speak, that would give you the purpose of life. So that's probably the single most important difference between the European and Japanese approach to purpose, I think.
Okay, I'm very curious of what you will tell us, so
Okay.
I would like to give you the stage and
All right, sure.
Listen to you. Thank you, Ken Mogi.
Okay, hi. Oops. Yeah, Ikigai. It has been published in 30 countries, maybe not as much as the Huge book. Recently, it was covered in CNN, so it's very interesting to see your book translated all over the world. And compared to, maybe you are familiar with these psychological concepts like flow, grit, and mindfulness. I think Ikigai occupies a very unique position because it is proactive, and also it deals with a wider spectrum of life. And it's related to wellness, creativity, quality of life, and anti-aging. Ikigai, briefly, is the purpose of life. What you get up in the morning for. So there are 5 pillars of Ikigai. Starting small, releasing yourself, harmony and sustainability, the joy of little things, and being in the here and now. I'm going to talk about two of these factors in this talk. Starting small. Now, I really think you should go to this restaurant. If you can get a reservation, maybe they can make a reservation for you. This is Sukiyabashi, and the master is the world's oldest Michelin three-star chef at the age of 94. As you can see, Barack Obama was invited by Mr. Abe, on this summit talk. It is really, really excellent sushi restaurant. It's an epitome of Japanese cuisine. However, when Onojiro started this restaurant, his purpose was not to make the world's greatest sushi restaurant. He came from a very humble background. But the reason why he started the sushi restaurant was because it was the cheapest to open. Of course, there are many different kinds of sushi restaurants. So, some restaurants come with very rich and expensive furnishment. But sushi actually started as food stand, like something like a food truck in the Edo era. And so if you do not go fancy about these furnishments, you can start very cheap, when you start a sushi restaurant. So the only reason why Jiro Ono started a sushi restaurant was because he could afford it. Then started his long, process of climbing up the ladder. But at any stage, he only had one motto, which was to stick to these small things. Because I think, it's the same for you guys too. If you want to make a great product, you've got to stick to small things. Otherwise, you cannot start anything, right? So that's starting small. The joy of little things. This is where I put some spice to my talk. Welcome to Japan. Small wrestling. Well, it's not about two fat guys bumping into each other, right? Well, it is about two fat guys bumping into each other. But we have something a lot more about that. Now, there are 10 ranks in sumo. The top rank, as you may know, is a yokozuna. However, there's another side of the story, As I said, only 10% of the sumo wrestlers make it to the top, few divisions where you can make a decent living. Most of them end up, as losers. If you're good, you climb up to the yokozuna. But if you're not, if you're a loser, you can also stay in the world of sumo. So in sumo, one is not forced to quit, how weak one may be. So there's no system where you are recommended to quit, even if you have won only 2 matches out of 132. So the joy of little things makes one carry on. There's no strict star system in the world of sumo. Of course there is a star system, but even the non-stars have something to carry on. That is ikigai, right? Now, nowadays we talk a lot about intelligence because it's the single important aspect of our life today. Traditionally, intelligence has been approached statistically, like in the Spearman's G factor. Spearman was a psychologist who developed this technique of doing factor analysis to analyze people's different abilities. And he came up with this idea of G factor, which is a kind of common denominator of different aspects of human intelligence. Neuroscience has found that activities in the prefrontal area correlates with this G factor. Now, there are different approaches of thinking. One is a rule-based specific thinking, and the other is what we call common sense, which is very ambiguous. Now, what we call neurotypical people, or in other words, normal people, they tend to be not so good at rule-based thinking, but they are very good at applying common sense. On the other hand, there are the so-called geeks and autistic savants. They are not so good at applying common sense. Maybe in this country there are some geeks, I'm sure. And artificial intelligence is actually, interestingly, developing as super geeks. They are not so good at common sense, but they are very good at applying rule-based thinking. So as I said, my lifelong goal is to understand how consciousness evolved in the brain. And interestingly, the way artificial intelligence is going now is different from the way brains evolved. It's going toward this supposedly, very strange singularity point, right? But it's going there through this application, rigorous application of rule-based thinking, whereas consciousness is more concerned with common sense and intuition. I'm sure you guys are really intelligent, but give it up. We cannot win this race to be more intelligent with the artificial intelligence, right? So I think in the coming years, there will be less focus on intelligence compared to personality. Personality is becoming more important because personality is about resource management. How you allocate your resources in your daily life, in the life-work balance. Pure intelligence can be ported out to artificial intelligence. So in the era of artificial intelligence, unique personalities are becoming more important, and social sensitivity between unique individuals would enhance team performance as well as create buzz. Now I'm coming to the final part of my talk, and I will touch on some examples from Japanese companies. Toyota, yeah, I once visited Toyota factory. It was the so-called internet bubble era in Japan. And many people were trying to win millions of dollars from a single idea. When I went to Toyota, the culture was totally different. Anybody from junior high school graduates to PhD, each of them could make a proposal to improve the so-called Toyota production system. But the compensation for a single proposal was something like $50, 50 US dollars. Nothing more, nothing less. What was amazing was Toyota employees were totally happy with it. No, they were not trying to make millions out of this excellent proposal, just $50. Because in Toyota, there was no star system. And when I'm saying this, I'm really stating the truth. Nobody is a star. Everybody is equal. Finally, I come to the example of Hoshino Resorts, one of the very uprising hotel and resort chain in Japan. Here, employees are encouraged to make their own decisions. They are autonomous. Mr. Hoshino, CEO and founder of Hoshino Resorts, once mentioned to me that when you delegate, you encourage people to make his or her own decisions, they feel such a pressure. Why? Because in the brain, dopamine, the single important reward molecule in the brain, is a combination of reward and action. Unless you do something by yourself, you cannot really feel the joy. If your boss orders you to do something and you obey and the result is successful, you get some pleasure, but not so much dopamine is released. So my final comment to sum up, it is very important to do it and reinforce it. Reinforcement learning is something happening in the brain. And you can start small, like Mr. Onojiro of Sukiyabashiro sushi restaurant. And most importantly, you can do it together. As I said, social sensitivity is a single important aspect of teamwork, right? We are all different. We are all different. However, we have to be sensitive to each other. Otherwise, we cannot make great work. So that's my talk, and if you have any questions, please send emails to this address. So thank you very much. So,
Yeah, thank you, Ken, for this really interesting and lively talk. If I understand your last comment right, or your summary, then you would say that purpose can only happen in social systems, in a group.
Yeah.
You cannot find your purpose alone.
I think because that's, as I explained, that's the traditional Japanese approach to purpose. And also, increasingly, because of this network theory, social approach in cognitive science and neuroscience, I think more and more researchers and practitioners are coming to this realization that purpose is actually a social construct. It's not something that would come from top down. I suspect even the 10 Commandments actually was a social construct at that age, originally. So, yeah, I strongly believe that purpose is a social construct.
Mm-hmm. I have an interesting question from the team, because to be honest, start small and enjoy the small things, and then develop from there is a very humble and also maybe Japanese culture influence topic. If we look over the ocean towards the Americans, then they would probably start with think big and be as ambitious as you can, and then you create purpose. I mean, Elon Musk doesn't do it below saving the world with electric cars or sending missiles to Mars. Would you say that big ambitions basically kill a sense of purpose, or isn't that another approach that works as well?
I think that's a very interesting question, but I suspect that even in the case of Mr. Musk, I think it probably was the joy of small things that carried him all the way to here. So if you think what kind of youth Elon Musk was, I'm pretty sure at some stage at least, he had to start from small things and enjoy small pleasures. And even today, maybe, if you break down the job as a great CEO or a great manager, I think even if you have these grand visions, in reality, you have to rely on these small joys. Otherwise, you cannot carry on, I think. It's not sustainable, I think.